It is 2 a.m. on a Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There are empty pizza boxes stacked up in the corner of the boardroom. Whiteboards are just covered in frantic red marker. And you have this team of exhausted executives who are about to pop a very, very expensive bottle of champagne.
Right. The classic go live moment.
Exactly. They just hit the button on a $50 million ERP migration. The new enterprise resource planning system is officially live.
And everyone's cheering.
Right. The project that consumed, literally the last 2 years of their lives is finally over.
Yeah.
But cut 6 months later.
This is where it gets bad.
Oh, it's a mess.
Mm.
The AI initiatives are completely stuck. Month-end financial close is an absolute nightmare.
Yep.
The compliance teams are still doing everything manually in spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Like, the system is brand new, it is state-of-the-art, but the problems are completely identical to the ones they had a year ago.
Yeah, because you change the software, but you don't actually change the underlying reality of the business.
Right.
It's what we call the classic highly expensive illusion of the go live.
The illusion. Which brings us to our mission today. Whether you are leading a massive tech team or prepping for a boardroom strategy meeting, or you just love understanding why massive, highly funded projects fail, our mission today is to uncover the root cause of that illusion.
And we have some really fascinating materials to dig into for this.
We do. We have a stack of materials today, 2 incredibly incisive articles detailing why these migrations consistently fail at the data level, and really why the choices made during these transitions will define an organization's next decade.
It really is a decade-long impact.
So we are looking at a fundamental category error that plagues modern enterprise tech. Okay, let's unpack this. Our sources lay out a core thesis, which is that organizations treat an ERP migration as a technology project.
Right. They see it as just plumbing.
Exactly. They think of it as just moving data from point A to point B.
Yeah.
But in reality, it is the most critical data strategy decision a company will ever make.
And, the technology project framing, it has an incredibly seductive logic to it. Well, when you frame a massive migration as a tech project, you get scopes, right? You get timelines and measurable deliverables.
Which executives love.
Totally. You have a source system, a target system, and data to move across a wire. It satisfies that organizational craving for structure and predictability.
Sure. Makes it look clean on a Gantt chart.
Exactly. It allows a project manager to sit in a meeting and simply ask, how do we move our current business processes to the new system?
And that sounds totally reasonable on the surface. If I buy a new phone, I just want my contacts and my photos moved over exactly as they are. I don't want to rethink how I communicate.
It sounds totally reasonable until you realize data in a global enterprise isn't just a static photo.
Right.
The question they should be asking is, what data architecture do we need to build for the future, and how do we use this massive disruption as the opportunity to build it?
Wow, okay.
Yeah, when a team just asks how to move the data, they are treating information as an object to be transported. They aren't treating it as an architecture to be fundamentally designed.
So our sources introduced this concept of data debt, which really clicked for me in understanding why this distinction matters.
Such a crucial concept.
Right, because we hear about technical debt all the time, right? Like old, clunky code that needs to be rewritten so a website doesn't crash under pressure. But data debt is different.
Yeah, it's much deeper.
It's the structural problems in how your information is fundamentally organized. One of the examples in the text is mismatched charts of accounts.
Oh, that's a classic one.
For those of us who aren't corporate accountants, what does that actually look like in practice?
So let's say your company acquired a smaller business in France, maybe, 5 years ago.
Okay.
In your U.S. headquarters system, you might categorize a software subscription under a bucket called IT expenses.
Makes sense.
But the French system might categorize that exact same purchase under a bucket called operational costs. A chart of accounts is basically just the master list of all the buckets a company uses to track its money.
Oh.
If you never take the time to standardize those buckets across the two companies, you have a mismatched chart of accounts. That's structural misalignment. That is data debt.
So every time you try to pull a global report to see how much the company spends on software, you're relying on someone manually reconciling what software even means across different systems.
Exactly. And add in legacy naming conventions where, one system calls a client customer A and another calls them cust_A_Inc. And you have a massive problem.
So over the years, those inconsistencies just compound exponentially.
Oh, absolutely. The legacy ERP still functions, but the data it generates becomes this tangled web of manual workarounds, spreadsheet fixes, and, just tribal knowledge.
So if you lift and shift that entire mess into a brand new system, it's like buying a state-of-the-art hypermodern mansion, but deciding to furnish it by dragging in all your broken, mismatched, termite-infested furniture from your old apartment.
That is exactly what it's like.
The house is new, but you still can't sit anywhere without something collapsing.
What's really fascinating here is that migrating data debt to a faster, more modern system doesn't eliminate the debt. It actually accelerates the cost of carrying it.
Wait, really? It accelerates it.
Yeah, because modern ERP systems process transactions at a much higher velocity than the systems built 15 years ago.
Oh, so it's just making mistakes faster.
Exactly. So if your underlying data structure is flawed, those errors propagate faster. Your supply chain bottlenecks happen quicker.
Wow.
Your compliance failures surface sooner. You are basically taking a structural defect and giving it a turbocharged engine.
Okay, so if we know the termite-infested furniture is going to ruin the new mansion, how does it keep sneaking past the movers?
It happens through 3 very specific, persistent architectural failures during the migration itself. We call them the 3 ghosts of migrations past.
The 3 ghosts. Okay, I love that. What's the first one?
The first is migrating models instead of redesigning them.
Which means?
They just blindly copy the old data model. They take the old master data hierarchies, the old customer classifications, and just drop them straight into the new target system.
But why? Like, why would anyone do that if it's broken?
The rationale there is entirely practical, honestly. Changing fundamental data structures introduces massive risk to the project timeline.
All right, it delays things.
Yeah, it requires the business side, the sales leaders, the finance teams to get heavily involved in an IT project, which they usually just don't have time for.
Right.
So the default approach is to replicate the existing model to minimize that perceived disruption.
I mean, I'm listening to this, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of a project manager whose job is on the line.
It's a stressful job.
It really is. If I go to my CEO and say, hey, we are delaying this $50 million rollout by 6 months to completely redesign the data model, and we're going to argue about what constitutes an IT expense, I'm getting fired.
You might, yeah.
So isn't this kind of deep architectural perfectionism exactly what causes these massive IT projects to go wildly over budget and derail?
It absolutely feels that way in the short term,
Right.
which is why it's such a common trap. But those project managers are miscalculating the long-term risk to the company.
How so?
Because the migration window is the moment of maximum organizational attention. It's the one time you actually have the budget allocated, the executive sponsorship mandated, and the business stakeholders engaged.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
Disruption is already expected because the core system is being torn down anyway.
So the pain is already happening, so you might as well fix the bone while the cast is off.
Exactly. Because if you don't redesign the data model right then, post-go-live inertia sets in. The system launches, the war room empties, people are just exhausted, and they just want stability.
They don't want to think about data anymore.
Right. That flawed data model becomes permanently entrenched in the new system. The choice that felt like the safe, pragmatic option during the project actually becomes a fatal flaw, locking the company into another decade of inefficiency.
Wow. Okay, so let's say a brave project manager does push back. They get the CEO's blessing, they redesign the data model, they scrub all the old duplicate records, and they load this beautifully cleansed data set into the new ERP. Does that guarantee a successful migration?
Not at all. And that brings us to the second ghost.
Let's hear it.
Most migration programs actually do have a massive data quality workstream to clean everything up for the launch. They spend millions scrubbing the data.
Right.
But they treat data quality as a one-time migration problem. They clean it once for the load, but they fail to build the governance rules and the ongoing architecture to keep it clean after the launch.
So this is like doing a massive, exhausting spring cleaning of your house, but you don't set up any rules for taking off your shoes at the door, and then you're shocked when the floors are muddy a week later.
That is a perfect analogy. Without strict validation rules, automated quality monitoring, and continuous correction mechanisms embedded directly into the new architecture, that pristine data begins to degrade the very second the first new transaction is posted.
Oh, wow. The very second.
Yeah. A sales rep enters a new client with a typo, a supplier uses the wrong currency code, and within months, the new system accumulates the exact Same structural decay as the old one, just at a higher speed.
That is brutal. Okay, so if the floors are getting muddy that fast, it makes me wonder what the house was actually designed to do in the first place, which leads to the third ghost, right?
Exactly. Designing data only for the ERP.
Right. Our sources argue there's a massive strategic blind spot in how these new systems are configured.
They are, because this raises a critical concern about what an ERP actually does. At their core, these are transaction processing systems. They execute purchase orders, process sales, and rate payments.
Right. They keep the lights on.
Yes, they are highly optimized for transactional integrity, meaning they make sure money moves correctly and safely from one account to another without duplication.
Okay.
But data optimized for a transaction is not the same as data optimized for intelligence.
In the text, they mention that intelligence platforms need data that is denormalized for fast querying. Now, for those of us who aren't database engineers, what does denormalized actually mean in plain English?
Okay, so in a highly normalized transactional database, like your standard ERP, data is broken down into lots of separate, efficient little tables to avoid duplicating information.
Okay, it's like puzzle pieces.
Yes. To get a complete picture of a single sale, the system has to pull the customer name from one table, the product ID from another, and the tax rate from a third.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work.
It's fantastic for processing a single payment quickly and securely. But if you ask an AI tool to analyze 10 years of sales trends across 1 billion records, doing that puzzle piece assembly for every single record simultaneously will literally freeze the system.
Oh, I see.
So denormalized data means pre-assembling those puzzle pieces into big, flat, comprehensive tables. So an AI or analytics tool can read massive amounts of information instantly without doing the assembly work itself.
Okay, so if you only design your data architecture to satisfy the ERP's internal operational needs, keeping those little puzzle pieces separated to run daily transactions,
Yeah.
and you completely ignore how an AI platform will need to consume it down the line, you're essentially locking your own data away from your smartest tools.
Completely. And then you face a massive, expensive retrofit challenge down the road. You will have to build complex extraction tools just to pull the data out of the ERP, reorganize it, and feed it to the AI.
Man, what a mess. So if optimizing just for the ERP creates this massive blind spot, what does actual success look like? What does the system look like that anticipates these future needs?
Well, we really have to redefine what it means to be ready for an ERP migration. The sources make a sharp distinction between being operationally ready and strategically ready.
Operationally versus strategically. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down for us.
So, most companies only ever achieve operational readiness.
Which means?
The data is clean enough to support basic business processes at go live. The factory floor runs, the paychecks go out.
The basics.
Exactly. That is necessary, but it is entirely insufficient for the modern corporate landscape. Strategic readiness involves building an architecture that supports 5 specific pillars.
Okay, what are the 5 pillars?
They are real-time compliance, financial intelligence, AI and automation, cross-entity consistency, and regulatory adaptability.
I mean, having all 5 of those functioning simultaneously sounds like the holy grail of corporate management.
It really is.
You need the financial intelligence to know where your cash is, the AI to automate the repetitive tasks, the cross-entity consistency so your global offices are actually speaking the same language, and the adaptability to roll with new laws.
Right.
But the sources spend a disproportionate amount of time zeroing in on that first pillar, real-time compliance.
Yes, and there's a very good reason for that urgency.
Yeah, it seems like while all 5 are important, real-time compliance is the one that has literal legal consequences right now. They mention a movement called real-time continuous transaction controls.
Yes, and this specific movement is fundamentally shifting the tectonic plates of enterprise technology. Over 100 countries have now activated these controls, particularly in regions like Latin America and Europe.
100 countries?
Yeah. Governments now require transaction data like invoices or tax receipts to be submitted directly to their regulatory platforms at, or sometimes even before, the exact moment of the transaction.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Governments are essentially tapping directly into corporate data streams in real time.
They are.
If I issue an invoice to a vendor in one of these countries, the National Tax Authority expects to know about it the second I hit send on the email.
And They require the data to be in a highly specific, machine-readable format instantly. You can no longer rely on downstream transformation. You can't have an ERP generate financial data in whatever proprietary format it likes, and then have a compliance team manually massage that data in spreadsheets at the end of the month to send to the government.
Oh, man. So if your data isn't instantly machine readable in the exact format the government demands, you aren't just inefficient. You are legally non-compliant. Your business literally halts.
Exactly.
You're basically building a sports car that instantly fails its emissions test the second you turn the key, and the government just boots the tires.
That's entirely accurate. If you didn't ask what fields must every transaction contain to be submitted compliantly before you built the system, you are retrofitting legal compliance into a system that wasn't built for it.
And I imagine retrofitting that is not cheap.
Retrofitting compliance into a live operational system is exponentially more expensive and risky than designing it into the foundation.
Okay, so to survive this real-time compliance era, and to actually hit all 5 pillars of strategic readiness without ripping the system apart every 6 months, our sources point to 2 massive architectural investments.
2 very critical secret weapons.
Secret weapons that most migration programs skip entirely because they are just frantically focused on hitting the go-live date. The first one is the canonical data model.
Yes. The canonical data model is arguably the single most impactful architectural investment a company can make during a migration.
Okay, what is it?
Think of it as a standardized, organization-wide definition of exactly how data is structured, formatted, and named.
So it's a universal language.
Exactly. It rigorously defines what a sales transaction looks like, how a vendor is identified universally, and what specific fields a financial posting absolutely must contain regardless of what country it originates from.
Okay, but practically speaking, how does a company actually build this? Who decides what the canonical model looks like? Because it sounds like it could just be a room full of IT engineers guessing what the business needs.
And that is the trap many organizations fall into. Building a canonical data model is a grueling business exercise, not just a tech task.
Grueling in what way?
Well, it requires bringing together the heads of finance, supply chain, compliance, and IT into a room, sometimes for months.
Months.
Yes. They have to argue and eventually agree on a single corporate definition for things like net revenue or active customer.
Oh, I can see how that would cause fights.
Big fights. But once the business side agrees on the definitions, data architects map those agreements into a formal, structured framework.
So it bridges the gap. It becomes the standard language everyone agrees to translate into.
Right.
If the new ERP speaks one proprietary language, the external AI platform speaks a second language, and the local government tax authority speaks a third, everything maps to the canonical data model in the middle.
It bridges that vast gap between the internal operational structures of the ERP and the external intelligence requirements of the consuming systems.
That's brilliant.
Without it, every time you buy a new AI tool or every time a new country passes a compliance law, you have to hire developers to build a bespoke, custom integration directly into the ERP's underlying code.
Which is a nightmare.
Total nightmare. With a canonical data model, you map everything to the standard once and let the systems translate.
But getting everyone to agree on a universal language is one thing. You still need an actual engine to do the translating in real time.
Okay.
Which brings us to the second mechanism the sources highlight, the data orchestration layer.
Yes. The data orchestration layer. It physically sits between your core ERP and all the other systems that consume your data.
Yeah, okay.
It takes the raw operational data from the ERP, transforms it into that canonical data model we just discussed, applies validation rules, enriches it with extra context, and then routes it to the AI or the analytics tool or the government portal.
All right, I'm putting my stressed out project manager hat back on here for a second.
Let's hear it.
We just dropped $50 million on a shiny new ERP system from a massive vendor. Why on earth are we building this orchestration layer completely outside of it? Where does it even live? Is it a separate software suite we buy or custom code we write from scratch? And shouldn't the expensive new ERP just handle all our business logic inherently?
That is exactly what every executive asks.
Right.
To answer your first question, the orchestration layer usually lives in a cloud-based middleware platform or a dedicated integration suite that you purchase and configure alongside the EOP.
Okay, so it is a separate thing.
It is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason you absolutely do not put it inside the ERP is crucial for long-term survival.
Why?
Because every organization has deeply specific business logic. Nuanced tax rules, country-specific validations, complex pricing structures. When you migrate, you are forced to decide where that logic lives.
Right.
The default is to shove it directly into the new ERP core because it feels like the path of least resistance. You want to keep everything in one box.
Yeah, if I pay for the massive system, I want it to do all the work.
But every piece of custom logic you bake into the ERP core makes future software upgrades a nightmare. It adds to what we call customization debt.
Customization debt.
Right. The sources emphasize that the orchestration layer's primary job is to keep the ERP core perfectly clean and standardized.
Oh, okay, so this is exactly like putting a protective screen protector on your phone.
Yes.
If a new country passes a crazy tax law or an AI tool suddenly needs a weird data format, that's like dropping the phone. The screen protector might crack to absorb the impact, but you just peel it off and replace it in the orchestration layer for $10. You don't have to dismantle the entire $1,000 phone, the core ERP, just to fix a shattered screen.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The orchestration layer scales as configuration, not as complex integration projects.
Scales as configuration.
Yeah, meaning when the e-invoicing regulations change in Brazil in 2028, a business analyst logs into the orchestration layer and simply updates a rule or changes a toggle setting. You don't have to hire a team of highly specialized developers to rip open the underlying foundational code of your ERP system. That is what it means to scale as configuration. It is built for agility.
And the tragedy is that building this orchestration layer during the initial migration costs a fraction of what it costs to build it later as a standalone rescue project.
Oh, absolutely.
Because later, the ERP is already surrounded by this messy web of custom code and broken integrations.
And that's the real lesson here. ERP migrations are incredibly rare, highly disruptive events. For most organizations, they happen maybe once a decade, if that.
A decade.
Yeah, you have this massive window of architectural flexibility where the business is actually willing to endure change and fund structural overhauls.
Right.
But that window snaps firmly shut the very second the system goes live and the champagne is poured.
So what does this all mean for you? Whether you are managing a massive multinational database or prepping for an IT steering committee, or, you're just trying to organize your own team's project workflow in a new app, the underlying lesson is identical. Don't just take your past and blindly move it into a faster system.
Exactly. Use the transition to actually design your future.
You have to be willing to ingest heavily in the design phase, to rationalize your data, and to force the business leaders to engage in data modeling, not just process design.
It's hard work, but it's the only way it works.
It really is.
Right, yeah.
And it leaves us with a final, somewhat unsettling thought to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. If we continue to feed flawed legacy data structures into these new, hyper-fast, AI-driven systems... Wait, hold on, let me restart that. If we continue to feed flawed data into these systems, are we really transforming our businesses? Or are we just learning to automate our organizational mistakes at the speed of light?
That's the real fear.
It is. Take a look around at the other tech upgrades happening in your life or your company right now. How many of them are actually hidden strategy projects that everyone is just too afraid to redesign? You definitely don't want to be the team popping champagne in the war room for a system that only knows how to fail faster.